The rain fell hard on the metal roof of the small apartment. It made a sound like tiny drums beating without rest. Inside, a little girl sat beside a bed, holding her mother's hand. The girl's name was Kim Yuna. She was only 8 years old, but her eyes looked much older. They were the eyes of a child who had seen too much sadness. Her mother, Kim Hannah, lay on the bed with her eyes closed. Her breathing was slow and rough. Each breath sounded like it hurt. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and her lips had lost their color. She had been sick for 3 months now. The doctors called it Vexian lung rot. It was a terrible disease that only attacked humans. Nobody knew why. The aliens who lived among them never got sick from it. Only humans suffered. Yuna wiped her mother's forehead with a wet cloth. The fever was getting worse again. Every night it came back stronger than before. Every morning Yuna hoped it would be gone, but it never was. "Mom," Yuna whispered. "Can you hear me?" Hannah opened her eyes slowly. They were tired eyes, full of pain, but when she looked at her daughter, they became soft and warm. She tried to smile, but even that small action seemed to take all her strength. "My little star," Hannah said. Her voice was weak like wind passing through dry leaves. "Why are you still awake? You should sleep." "I'm not tired," Yuna lied. She was very tired. She had not slept well in weeks. But she could not sleep while her mother was suffering. Hannah reached up and touched Yuna's cheek. Her fingers were cold. "You are such a good girl," she said. "I am so proud of you." Yuna felt tears burning in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She had to be strong. Her mother needed her to be strong. They lived on a space station called New Busan. It was a human colony far from Earth, sitting at the edge of the Galactic Union's territory. The station was divided into 2 parts. The upper levels were clean and bright, filled with shops and restaurants and wealthy aliens from many different worlds. The lower levels were darker and poorer. That was where the humans lived. That was where Yuna and her mother had their tiny apartment. Before she got sick, Hannah had worked as a cargo handler. She would wake up early every morning and go to the docks to move heavy boxes from ships. The work was hard and the pay was small, but she never complained. She always said that as long as they had each other, they had everything. But then the sickness came. At first, it was just a small cough. Hannah thought it was nothing. She kept working. But the cough got worse. Then came the fever. Then came the blood. By the time they went to the clinic, the disease had already spread deep into her lungs. Dr. Park Dong-woo was an old man with kind eyes and gentle hands. He had been a doctor on New Busan for 40 years. He had seen many cases of Vexian lung rot. He knew there was only one medicine that could cure it. It was called Novacillin 7, but the medicine was very expensive. It was controlled by a group of alien merchants called the Toravane Syndicate. They set the prices, and the prices were higher than most humans could ever pay. "How much does it cost?" Yuna had asked the doctor 2 weeks ago. Dr. Park had looked at her with sad eyes. "More than your mother earns in 10 years, he said quietly. Yuna did not understand. The medicine existed. It could save her mother. Why would anyone keep it from people who needed it? It did not make sense to her young mind. She tried everything she could think of. She went to the local government office and begged for help. They told her there was no money for individual cases. She went to charity groups, but they said the waiting list was too long. She even tried to write a letter to the Toravane Syndicate, but her letter was never answered. Nobody would help them. Nobody cared about one sick woman in the lower levels of New Busan tonight. Yuna sat in the darkness and listened to her mother's painful breathing. She thought about all the things her mother had done for her. When Yuna was a baby, her father had left them. He had gone away on a ship and never came back. Hannah had raised Yuna alone. She had worked 2 jobs sometimes just to make sure Yuna had enough to eat. She had gone hungry so that Yuna could have food. She had worn old clothes so that Yuna could have new ones for school. And now her mother was dying, and Yuna could do nothing. Or could she? She remembered something she had heard earlier that day. She had gone to the clinic to get more pain medicine for her mother. While she was waiting, she heard Dr. Park talking to a nurse in the next room. They did not know she was listening. A Torvani medical ship arrived this morning, Dr. Park had said. The Gilded Fortune. It's carrying a huge shipment of Novacillin-7, enough to treat every human on this station. But we cannot afford even one vial, the nurse had replied sadly. I know, the doctor said. They will sell it to the rich colonies in the inner systems. Our people will keep dying while the medicine sits in their cargo hold. Yuna had remembered every word. A Torvani ship. The Gilded Fortune. Novacillin-7. Enough medicine to save everyone. Now, sitting in the dark apartment, an idea began to form in her mind. It was a crazy idea. A dangerous idea. But it was the only idea she had. She looked at her mother sleeping on the bed. Hannah's breathing was getting worse. The doctor had said she might have 2 weeks left. Maybe less. Yuna made her decision. She stood up slowly and walked to the small closet where she kept her things. She put on her darkest clothes and her worn-out shoes. She tied her hair back, so it would not get in her way. She looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. A thin girl with determined eyes stared back at her. I will save you, Mom, she whispered. I promise. She went to the bed and kissed her mother's forehead. Hannah did not wake up. She was too deep in her fevered sleep. Then Yuna walked to the door. She looked back one more time at her mother, lying there so small and weak. Her heart felt like it was being squeezed by a giant hand. But she did not cry. She could not afford to cry. Not now. She opened the door and stepped out into the corridor. The hallway was dark and empty. Most people were asleep. The station's lights had been dimmed to save power as they were every night. Yuna began to walk. Her feet knew the way through the lower levels. She had lived here all her life. She knew every corner, every shortcut, every hiding place. But tonight, she was not going to the places she knew. Tonight, she was going up. Up to the docking rings. Up to where the alien ships waited. Up to where no human child was ever supposed to go alone. She was scared. Of course she was scared. She was only 8 years old, and she was about to do something that could get her in very big trouble. But every time fear tried to stop her, she thought of her mother. She thought of Hannah's pale face and weak smile. She thought of all the times her mother had been brave for her. Now it was her turn to be brave. The journey to the upper levels would take at least an hour. Yuna did not know what she would find when she got there. She did not know if her plan would work. She did not know if she would come back, but she knew one thing for certain. She would do anything to save her mother. Anything at all. And so the little girl walked into the darkness. Carrying nothing but hope and love in her heart, the upper levels of New Busan were nothing like the place where Yuna lived. Here, the walls were clean and white. The lights were bright and steady. The air smelled fresh, not like the dusty, recycled air of the lower sectors. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked perfect. Yuna moved carefully through the shadows. She had learned long ago how to be invisible. In the lower levels, being small and quiet could keep you safe from the bigger kids who liked to cause trouble. Now those same skills would help her do something much more dangerous. She passed shops that were closed for the night. Their windows showed beautiful things that she could never afford. Fancy clothes, strange alien foods, jewelry that sparkled like stars. She did not stop to look. She did not have time. The docking rings were at the very top of the station. That was where ships from all across the galaxy came to trade and resupply. Yuna had never been there before. Humans from the lower levels were not welcome in that part of the station. But tonight, she had no choice. She found a maintenance tunnel that led upward. The entrance was hidden behind a broken vending machine that nobody had fixed in years. Yuna squeezed through the narrow gap and began to climb. The tunnel was dark and dusty. Strange pipes ran along the walls, making humming sounds. Sometimes the metal under her feet creaked, and she would freeze, heart pounding. Waiting to see if anyone had heard, nobody came. She kept climbing. After what felt like forever, she reached a vent that looked out into the docking area. Through the metal bars, she could see the ships. There were many of them, all different shapes and sizes. Some were long and thin like needles. Some were round like giant balls. Some looked like living creatures with metal skin. And there, in the center of the docking ring, was the biggest ship of all. It was golden and beautiful, with smooth curves and bright lights. Words were painted on its side in a language Una could not read, but she knew what ship it was. It had to be the Gilded Fortune. She pushed the vent cover aside and crawled out onto a high walkway. Below her, she could see aliens walking around. Most of them were Torvani. They were tall creatures, almost 3 meters high, with bodies like insects. They had 6 arms and hard shells that shone like black glass. Their eyes were big and round, with no visible emotion in them. Una had seen Torvani before, but always from far away. Up close, they were terrifying. But she swallowed her fear and kept moving. She watched the guards for a long time, learning their patterns. They walked in circles around the ship, checking every entrance. But there was one spot they did not watch closely. A waste disposal chute on the side of the ship. It was small and dirty. Not the kind of place anyone important would use. But it was perfect for a small girl. Una waited until the guards turned away. Then she ran. Her feet barely made a sound on the metal floor. She reached the chute and pulled it open. A terrible smell came out. She almost gagged, but she held her breath and climbed inside. The chute was tight and slippery. She had to push herself forward with her elbows and knees. Something wet and sticky touched her hands. She did not want to know what it was. Finally, she came out the other end and dropped onto the floor of a dark room. It was a storage area filled with garbage and old equipment. Una stood up and wiped her hands on her clothes. She was inside the ship. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. But she could not stop now. She had to find the medicine. She moved through the ship like a ghost. The hallways were wide and well lit, but there were many places to hide. Whenever she heard footsteps, she would duck behind a corner or squeeze into a small space. The Torvani were big, but they were not fast, and they never looked down. They did not expect to find a human child on their ship. Why? Una did not know how to read Torvani writing. All the signs on the walls meant nothing to her, but she remembered something her mother had taught her. The medical symbol was the same everywhere in the galaxy, a circle with a cross inside. No matter what language you spoke, that symbol meant medicine. She looked for that symbol on every door she passed. Most rooms were locked. Some were open, but contained nothing useful. Weapons, tools, containers of strange liquids. None of it was what she needed. Then she found it. A large door with the medical symbol painted in bright blue. Una pressed her hand against the control panel, but nothing happened. The door was locked. She felt her hope beginning to fade. How could she get inside? She looked around and saw a small vent near the floor. It was tiny, barely big enough for her body. But she had no other choice. She pulled the vent cover off and crawled inside. The vent led her through darkness for several meters. Then it opened into a large room filled with cold air. Una climbed out and looked around. Her breath made white clouds in the freezing air. The room was lined with shelves, and on those shelves were hundreds of small vials. They glowed with a soft blue light. Each vial had a label that Una could not read, but she recognized the medical symbol. This was it. This was Nova CILLIN-7, that there was enough medicine here to save thousands of people. Thousands of mothers and fathers and children who were sick and dying. And the Torvani were going to sell it to rich people who could afford it, while everyone else suffered. Anger burned in Una's chest. But she did not have time to be angry. She reached up and grabbed one vial, just one. That was all she needed to save her mother. She put the vial inside her shirt, close to her heart where it would be safe. Then she turned to leave. That was when the alarm started. Red lights flashed everywhere. A loud siren filled the air. Una froze in terror. They knew she was here. They had found her. She ran. She did not know where she was going. She just ran. Through hallways that all looked the same, past doors that were now locked tight. The alarm kept screaming, and she could hear heavy footsteps behind her. The Torvani were chasing her. She turned a corner and saw an exit ahead. A door that led out of the ship? Freedom was so close. She pushed her legs to run faster. Her lungs burned. Her muscles ached. But she could not stop. She was almost at the door when something grabbed her arm. A massive claw closed around her, lifting her off the ground. She screamed and kicked, but it was useless. The Torvani guard held her like she weighed nothing. Its black eyes looked down at her without any expression. "Human child," the guard said. Its voice was cold and mechanical, coming from a translator device on its chest. "You are not permitted here." Una struggled with all her strength, but she could not break free. The vial was still hidden inside her shirt. Maybe they would not find it. Maybe she could still save her mother. But then another guard came. It searched her roughly and found the vial. It held up the glowing medicine for everyone to see. "Thief," the first guard said. "You have stolen property of the Torvani Syndicate." "Please," Una begged. Tears were running down her face now. "Please. My mother is dying. I just wanted to save her. Please let me go." The guards did not answer. They did not care about her tears or her words. They carried her away from the ship, away from her only hope. Una had failed, and now she did not know what would happen to her. She did not know if she would ever see her mother again. All she could do was cry and think of Hannah. Alone in their tiny apartment, still waiting for her daughter to come home. The news spread like fire across New Busan. By morning, everyone knew what had happened. A human child had broken into a Torvani ship. A human child had tried to steal medicine. It was the biggest story the station had seen in years. The Torvani were furious. They called it an attack on their property and their honor. They demanded justice. They said if the humans did not punish the thief properly, they would leave the station and never trade with New Busan again. That would be a disaster. The station needed Torvani supplies to survive. The Galactic Union called an emergency tribunal. Leaders from many different species gathered in the Great Hall at the center of the station. It was a huge room with a high ceiling and walls covered in flags from every member world. At the front was a raised platform where the judges sat. There were 5 of them, each from a different species. They would decide what happened to the little girl who had dared to steal from the Torvani. Una was brought into the room by 2 guards. She was still wearing her dirty clothes from the night before. Her face was pale and tired. She had not slept at all. She had spent the night in a cold cell, alone and afraid, thinking about her mother. The room was full of aliens. Torvani merchants in expensive robes. Diplomats from distant worlds. Reporters with floating cameras. They all stared at Una as she was led to a small platform in the center of the room. She felt like a tiny ant surrounded by giants. On one side of the room stood the human delegation. There were only a few of them, dressed in simple clothes. They looked nervous and worried. At their head was a man named Choi Sunwoo. He was the human ambassador to the Galactic Union. His job was to speak for all the humans on New Busan today. His job was to defend a little girl. On the other side stood the Torvani. Their leader was a massive creature called Lord Vikros. He was even bigger than the other Torvani, and his shell was decorated with gold and jewels. He looked at Una with cold, empty eyes. To him, she was nothing. Less than nothing. Just a problem to be solved. The head judge, a tall blue alien with many eyes, called the tribunal to order. The room fell silent. "We are here to decide the case of the human child Kim Una," the judge announced. "She is accused of entering a Torvani vessel without permission and stealing medical supplies worth over 10,000 credits. How does the accused respond?" Everyone looked at Una. She did not know what to say. She was so scared she could barely breathe. Her legs were shaking. Her hands were cold. "Why? I took it," she said in a small voice. "I took the medicine." A murmur went through the crowd. Lord Vikros stepped forward, his 6 arms folded across his chest. "The human admits her crime," he said. His voice was deep and harsh, translated by a device that made it sound even colder. "The evidence is clear. She violated our ship. She stole our property. According to Galactic Union law, she must pay for her crime." The judge nodded. "What punishment does the Torvani Syndicate demand?" Lord Vikros smiled. It was not a nice smile. "The medicine she stole is worth 10,000 credits. The damage to our reputation is worth much more. We demand full payment. If she cannot pay, she must work to pay off the debt. Under Torvani law, that means indentured service. Yuna did not understand the big words, but Ambassador Choi Sun-woo did. His face went white. You want to make her a slave? He said. She is a child. She is a thief, Lord Vecrose replied calmly. Age does not matter. The law is the law. At standard labor rates, she would need to work for, let me calculate, approximately 47 years to pay her debt. 47 years. Yuna would be an old woman by then. She would spend her whole life working for the Torvani. She would never see her mother again. She would never be free. The room erupted in noise. The humans shouted in anger. The Torvani hissed and clicked. The other aliens watched with curious eyes. The judges called for order, but nobody listened. Yuna stood alone in the middle of it all. The noise washed over her like waves in a storm. She felt so small, so helpless. She had only wanted to save her mother. She had not wanted any of this. Then something inside her broke. She pulled away from the guards who held her. They were surprised and let go for just a moment. That moment was enough. Yuna ran to the center of the chamber, right in front of the judge's platform. Stop, she screamed. Her voice was high and clear, cutting through all the noise. Please stop. Everyone fell silent. They all stared at the tiny girl standing there with tears running down her face. I know what I did was wrong, Yuna said. Her voice was shaking, but she did not stop. I know I should not have taken the medicine, but I only did it for my mom. She was crying now, really crying. The tears fell like rain, and she did not try to hide them. My mom is sick. She is dying. The doctor said she only has a few days left. I tried to get help. I begged everyone, but nobody would help us. Nobody cared. She looked at Lord Vecrose with her red, swollen eyes. You have so much medicine, enough to save thousands of people, but you will not share it with people who cannot pay. You let us die because we are poor. How is that fair? How is that right? Lord Vecrose said nothing. His face showed no emotion. Yuna turned to the judges. I am not a thief. I am just a little girl who loves her mother. I did not want to steal. I just wanted my mom to live. Is that so wrong? Is it wrong to want your mother to live? Her voice broke completely. She fell to her knees on the cold floor, sobbing. Please, she whispered. Please do not take me away from her. She needs me. She is all alone. If I am gone, who will take care of her? Who will hold her hand when she is scared? Who will tell her that everything will be okay? The room was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Lord Vecrose seemed frozen in place. Ambassador Choi Sun-woo walked slowly toward Yuna. He knelt down beside her and put his hand on her shoulder. His eyes were wet too. It is okay, he said softly. You are very brave. Your mother would be proud of you, but Yuna could not hear him. She could only think of her mother, lying alone in that small apartment, getting weaker with every passing hour. She had tried so hard to save her. She had risked everything, and she had failed. Now she would lose everything. Her freedom, her future, her mother in that moment. Yuna felt like the loneliest person in the entire universe. But she did not know that something was about to change. She did not know that her words had touched hearts she could not see. She did not know that across the station people were watching. Humans who had heard her story. Humans who understood what it meant to love someone so much that you would do anything for them. Something was about to happen. Something that nobody expected. Something that would change everything. But first, the little girl on the floor had to keep crying. Because sometimes, tears are the beginning of miracles. Ambassador Choi Sun-woo helped Yuna stand up. The little girl was still crying, but she was trying to be brave. He could see it in the way she lifted her chin and looked at the judges. She was scared, but she was not giving up. Sun-woo felt something powerful burning in his chest. It was pride. Pride in this tiny human who had shown more courage than most adults ever would. Pride in what she represented. pride in what it meant to be human. He turned to face the tribunal. The judges were waiting. The Torvani were waiting. The whole room was waiting to see what the humans would do. "May I speak?" Sun Wu asked the judges. The head judge nodded. "You may." Sun Wu walked to the center of the chamber. He was not a tall man. He was not strong or powerful. But in that moment, he felt like he could move mountains. "I will not argue about laws today," he began. His voice was calm and steady. "I will not talk about treaties or trade agreements or diplomatic relations. Instead, I want to tell you about humans." He looked around the room at all the different aliens watching him. Many of you have wondered about us. You have seen us spread across the galaxy faster than any other species. You have seen us survive on planets that should have killed us. You have seen us fight battles we should have lost. And you have asked yourselves, how? How do these small, weak creatures do it? He paused and looked at Yuna. The answer is standing right here. The answer is an 8-year-old girl who walked into danger because she loved her mother. Lord Vakros made a sound of disgust. "Love is not a defense for theft," No Sun Wu agreed. "But love is what makes us human. It is the fire that burns in our hearts. It is the thing that makes us get up when we fall down. It is the reason we keep fighting when everything seems hopeless." He walked closer to the Torvani leader. "You asked for payment? You said this child must pay for what she took. But you do not understand what you are really asking. You are not just taking one child. You are attacking the very thing that makes humanity strong." "Pretty words," Lord Vecros said coldly. "But words do not pay debts." "No," Sun Wu said. "They do not." He turned to look at the doors of the tribunal chamber. Something was happening outside. There were sounds, voices, many, many voices. But perhaps something else will. The doors opened. Humans began to pour into the room. Not just a few. Hundreds of them. Workers in dirty uniforms. Shopkeepers in simple clothes. Old men and old women. Young men and young women. Families with children. They came from the lower levels, from the factories, from the docks. They filled the chamber until there was no more space. The aliens watched in confusion. The judges called for order, but the humans were not making trouble. They were just standing there, quiet and calm. Looking at the little girl in the center of the room, Dr. Park Dongwu pushed through the crowd. His old face was red from hurrying. He walked up to the judge's platform and held up a small device. "I have credits here," he said. "All my savings. It is not much, but I want to give it to pay the child's debt." "So do I," said a woman behind him. She was young, maybe 20 years old, wearing the uniform of a station cleaner. "I do not have a lot, but I will give what I have." "And me," said an old man with a bent back. "And me," said a mother holding her baby. "On me." "And me," and me. The voices joined together like a song. One by one, humans stepped forward. They held up credit chips and paper notes and whatever money they had. They put it all together in a pile at the judge's feet. Yuna watched with wide eyes. She did not understand what was happening. These people were strangers. She did not know their names or their faces. Why were they helping her? Ambassador Sun Wu smiled. "You see," he said to Lord Vecros, "this is what you do not understand about humans. When one of us suffers, all of us feel it. When one of us needs help, all of us answer. We are not strong because we are big or fast or smart. We are strong because we stand together." The pile of credits kept growing. A technician from the power plant gave half his month's salary. A cook from a small restaurant gave her tip money. A group of children gave their allowances. Nobody was forced to give. Nobody was asked. They simply gave because they wanted to. The news spread beyond the tribunal chamber. It spread across New Busan. It spread to other human colonies on distant stations and planets. Within hours, credits were flowing in from everywhere, from places Yuna had never heard of, from people she would never meet. The judges looked at the growing pile of money with amazement. Nothing like this had ever happened before. In all the history of the Galactic Union, no species had ever done anything like this. Lord Vecros watched in silence. His black eyes showed nothing, But something was happening behind them. Something was changing. By the end of the day, the money had been counted. The humans had not just paid Yuna's debt, they had paid it 100 times over. There was enough to buy every vial of Novacillin 7 on the Gilded Fortune. There was enough to fund a new clinic in the lower levels. There was enough to change everything. Impossible, Lord Vikros whispered. It was the first time anyone had heard uncertainty in his voice. Ambassador Sunwoo stood before him. Not impossible, just human. But why? The Torvani Lord asked. Why would so many sacrifice for one child they do not know? It does not make logical sense. Sunwoo thought about the question. He looked at Yuna, who was now surrounded by humans, who wanted to hug her and tell her that everything would be okay. He looked at the pile of credits that represented countless acts of kindness, because, he said slowly, we see ourselves in her. Every human who gave today was not just helping Yuna, they were remembering their own mothers, their own children, their own loved ones. They know what it feels like to love someone so much that you would do anything to save them. And they know that one day they might need that same kind of help. He put his hand on his heart. Humans do not survive by being the strongest or the smartest. We survive by caring for each other, by lifting each other up when we fall, by never leaving anyone behind. That is our greatest strength. That is our greatest weapon. That is what makes us human. Lord Vikros looked at the sea of human faces around him. Workers and doctors and children and old people, none of them were rich. None of them were powerful. But together, they had done something incredible. For the first time in his long life, the great Torvani merchant did not know what to say. Why Una broke free from the crowd and ran to Ambassador Sunwoo. She hugged him tightly, her small arms barely reaching around his waist. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sunwell knelt down and looked into her eyes. Do not thank me, he said gently. Thank them, pointed at all the humans filling the room. They are the real heroes today. All of them. Una turned and looked at the crowd. All those faces. All those strangers who had become her family. She did not have words big enough to thank them. So she just cried and smiled and waved and hoped they understood. They understood. They all understood. The tribunal chamber was quiet now. Most of the humans had gone home. The judges had left to discuss what had happened. Only a few people remained. Una sat on a bench, exhausted but relieved. Ambassador Sunwoo sat beside her, speaking softly with Dr. Park. Lord Vikros had not moved. The great Torvani merchant stood alone near the platform, staring at nothing. His advisors had tried to speak with him, but he had sent them away. He needed time to think. For 10,000 years, the Torvani had been merchants. They bought and sold. They measured and calculated. They made deals and broke deals. Everything had a price. Everything could be counted. That was how the universe worked. That was how it had always worked, until today. Lord Vikros had seen something today that his calculations could not explain. He had seen hundreds of poor humans give their money to save a child they did not know. He had seen strangers cry for a little girl they had never met. He had seen love in its purest form. It confused him more than anything he had ever encountered. He thought about his own people. The Torvani were strong. They were smart. They had built an empire of trade that stretched across the galaxy. But would they ever do what the humans had done today? Would they sacrifice for a stranger? Would they stand together for one small child? He knew the answer. No, they would not. The Torvani looked out for themselves. That was their way. They called it wisdom. They called it survival. But now, watching the little human girl sitting on that bench, Lord Vikros wondered if the Torvani were missing something. Something important. Something that made life worth living. He walked toward Una. His heavy footsteps echoed in the empty chamber. The humans looked up, worried. Ambassador Sunwoo stood quickly, ready to protect the child if needed. But Lord Vikros raised one of his 6 hands in a gesture of peace. I mean no harm, he said. His voice was different now, softer. I only wish to speak with the child. Sunwoo hesitated, then nodded. He stepped aside, but stayed close. Lord Vakros lowered himself until his great insect-like head was level with Yuna's face. The little girl looked at him with wide eyes. She was still scared of him. Of course she was. He was a monster from her nightmares. A giant alien who had wanted to take her freedom. Child Vakros said slowly. I have a question for you. Yuna swallowed hard. Yes, when you went to my ship. When you crawled through the darkness and risked everything. Were you not afraid? Yuna nodded. I was very afraid. Then why did you do it? The question hung in the air. Yuna thought about it for a long moment. Then she spoke in her small, tired voice. Because I love my mom. And when you love someone, you do not think about being afraid. You just think about them. You think about keeping them safe. You think about making them happy. Everything else does not matter. Lord Vakros was silent. His black eyes stared at her, but they seemed different now, less cold, less empty. Among my people, he said finally, we do not have this thing you call love. We have partnerships. We have alliances. We have arrangements that benefit both sides. But we do not have what you described. We do not risk everything for one person. We calculate. We measure. We survive. He paused. But perhaps survival is not the same as living. He reached into his robe and pulled out something small. It glowed with soft blue light. Yuna's breath caught in her throat. It was the vial of Novacillin 7, the same one she had stolen, the same one that could save her mother. Take it, Lord Vakros said. Yuna stared at him. She could not believe what she was hearing. But the debt, the punishment. The debt has been paid, Vakros said. Your people saw to that. As for punishment, he made a strange sound that might have been a laugh. What punishment could I give that would mean anything? You have already shown me something I never knew I was missing. He placed the vial in Yuna's trembling hands. Save her, and tell her something for me. What? Yuna whispered. Lord Vakros stood up to his full height. For a moment he looked like the powerful merchant lord he had always been. But there was something new in his eyes. Something that looked almost like wonder. Tell her that her daughter taught the Torvani something we have never learned in 10,000 years of civilization. Yuna held the vial against her heart. Tears were flowing down her cheeks again, but these were happy tears. What is that? She asked. Lord Vakros looked at her, then at the empty chamber where hundreds of humans had stood together just hours ago. That love is the most terrifying and beautiful force in the universe, and that perhaps it is time for my people to learn it too. He turned and walked away. His footsteps echoed through the chamber until they faded into silence. Yuna looked at the vial in her hands. It was so small, so fragile, but it held everything. Her mother's life, her family's future, the kindness of strangers, the change of a heart that had seemed unchangeable. Dr. Park knelt beside her. Come, he said gently. Let us go save your mother. They took Yuna home in a transport vehicle. The streets of the lower levels were crowded with people who wanted to see her. They cheered and clapped as she passed. Children waved. Old women cried. Everyone knew her story now. Everyone knew what she had done. When they reached her apartment, Yuna ran inside. Her mother was still lying on the bed, weaker than ever. Hannah's eyes fluttered open when she heard her daughter's voice. Yuna, she whispered. Is that you? Yuna threw herself onto the bed and hugged her mother. I am here, Mom. I am here. And I brought you medicine. You are going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. Dr. Park worked quickly. He injected the Novacillin 7 into Hannah's arm and stepped back. Now we wait, he said. The medicine works fast. She should start feeling better within a few hours. Yuna held her mother's hand and did not let go. She told her everything that had happened. The ship, the trial, the humans who had come to help, Lord Vakros and his strange words about love. Hannah listened with tears in her eyes. You did all that? She said. My little girl did all that. I only did it for you, Mom, Yuna said. I only did it because I love you. Hannah pulled her daughter close. I know, she whispered. I know. The medicine worked just as Dr. Park had promised. Within days, Hannah was sitting up. Within weeks, she was walking again. Within months, she was back to work, stronger than ever. But the story did not end there. The events on New Busan spread across the galaxy. Other species heard about the little human girl and the army of strangers who had saved her. They heard about Lord Vikros and how he had changed. They heard about love. This strange human thing that made no logical sense but somehow changed everything. The Torvani Syndicate announced new policies. Medicine would be available to everyone at fair prices. No one would be turned away because they were poor. It was a small change, but it was a beginning. Yuna grew up to become an ambassador herself. She traveled to distant worlds and spoke about her people. She told the story of that day in the tribunal chamber. She told everyone about the power of love, the strength of community, and the courage of a little girl who just wanted to save her mom. And in her office, on her desk, she kept a small blue vial. It was empty now. The medicine was long gone, but she kept it to remember. To remember where she came from. To remember what she had learned, that sometimes smallest act of desperate love can change the entire galaxy. That sometimes being human is the greatest superpower of all.